While most focus on the mightiest forces on the global stage, there's something fascinating about exploring the opposite end of the spectrum. Today, we'll take you on a revealing journey through the world's least formidable militaries. Curious to know who makes the list? Stay tuned as we uncover the 6 most underpowered armies you might not expect. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the conversation in the comments. Let's dive in. 6th, North Macedonia. Located at the heart of the historically volatile Balkans, one would expect North Macedonia to maintain a strong military to fend off any regional ambitions. The Balkans have long been a region where territorial disputes simmer, with each nation eyeing pieces of their neighbors. North Macedonia, unfortunately, finds itself in the thick of these tensions. You'd think that a country facing territorial claims from Greece, Western Bulgaria, and grappling with unresolved issues with Albania and Serbia would build up a formidable defense force. However, the reality is quite the opposite. North Macedonia not only has the weakest military in its region, but ranks among the weakest globally. Geography hasn't done it any favors either. This landlocked nation, with a modest population of 2.1 million, can only muster about 782,000 individuals fit for service. Yet, they lack the resources to equip and prepare such a force. Like many post-communist states, corruption siphons off a large portion of its already limited defense budget, which in 2023 stood at just over $292 million, an amount that wouldn't even buy 2 B-2 Spirit bombers. This limited budget allows for an active military of only 6,850 personnel. Their arsenal? 31 tanks, of which only 19 are operational, and most of their equipment is aging Soviet relics, barely functional and outdated. Even the tanks they do possess, such as the T-72A, have shown inefficiency in modern warfare, as demonstrated in the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. North Macedonia's military strength does benefit from a handful of more modern armored vehicles, courtesy of Greece, Germany, and the US. But these too are outdated and in questionable condition. Now, when it comes to air defense, things don't look much better. North Macedonia has a total of 0 fighter jets, 0 attack planes, and 0 transport aircraft. That said, they do have a small air force, 6 active trainer jets and 6 operational transport helicopters. It may not sound like much, and with an air force personnel of just 350, it's not exactly a show of aerial dominance. So how does North Macedonia maintain its sovereignty? It all boils down to regional balance. While some of its neighbors may covet its territory, others are poised to intervene if anyone makes a move. This delicate balance of power keeps things in check. To further bolster its security, North Macedonia joined NATO in 2020. Now, with the backing of NATO's 7 million troops and its robust economy, the nation finds itself well defended, despite its limited military capacity. In fact, 3 out of its 5 neighboring countries are also NATO members, adding to its security blanket. Despite its limited resources and military challenges, North Macedonia's clever geopolitical positioning has ensured its survival. But you might be surprised to learn that even wealthier countries are not immune to similar military struggles. Stay tuned as we explore the next on our list. 5. Luxembourg. Nestled comfortably between 2 of Europe's largest superpowers, France and Germany, Luxembourg enjoys a unique position as a buffer state, a fact that significantly enhances its security. But despite its strategic location, Luxembourg simply doesn't have the manpower to hold its own in any military conflict. With one of the smallest populations in the world, even if all 90,000 fit-for-service citizens were called to duty, Luxembourg's military wouldn't stand a chance against its much larger neighbors. Still, Luxembourg maintains an active military force of 1,000 personnel. The reason? That remains a bit of a mystery. This tiny landlocked country has no tanks, no artillery, and only 180 military vehicles. With no coastline, there's no need for a navy. And given the limited space, the country lacks a functional airbase. So no air force either. Or it's not sitting on any strategic resources that would make it a tempting target. Fortunately for Luxembourg, the days of conquest and territorial ambitions are long behind in Western Europe. Its sovereignty isn't under threat, and even if it were, it's hard to imagine France or Germany igniting another world war over such a small, non-strategic piece of land. Now, here's the kicker. Luxembourg spends $460 million annually on defense. That's more than North Macedonia, despite having fewer personnel and almost no military hardware. It seems those 1,000 active soldiers are very well compensated. And it's safe to say that military service in Luxembourg might just be one of the most comfortable jobs around. But as modest as Luxembourg's military might be, the armies on the rest of our list make this one look surprisingly robust by comparison. Stick around to find out who ranks next. Fourth, Panama. It's a bit unfair to critique the strength of Panama's army, mainly because they don't have one. After the US invasion in 1990, which deposed General Noriega, Panama's military was disbanded, and the Panama Defense Force became a thing of the past. In its place, a paramilitary force emerged, with a focus more on internal security than external defense. Today, Panama's primary defense comes from a 27,000-strong paramilitary unit responsible for safeguarding critical infrastructure. While Panama doesn't have any tanks or heavy artillery, and its naval forces are limited to about 20 Coast Guard vessels, it does maintain a small air force. However, don't expect to see any fighter jets or bombers. Panama's air power is mostly for rescue missions and transport, consisting of 14 transport planes, 4 trainer jets, 1 special mission aircraft, and 22 helicopters. Nothing designed for combat. But what is there to protect in Panama? No one is coming for the banana plantations or dense jungles. However, there's one vital piece of infrastructure that makes Panama an attractive target: the Panama Canal. This key trade route connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and its economic value is immense. The US recognized this during its 1990 intervention and still maintains a significant stake in its control today. Luckily for Panama, nature also acts as a formidable defense. To the north, they share a border with Costa Rica, which, like Panama, has no military. To the south is Colombia, a nation with a powerful army and a strong economy. Yet, the border between the two is an almost impassable jungle. There are no roads, railways, or even walking paths, making any invasion from the south nearly impossible. And if that wasn't enough, Panama has also found itself playing a key role in the financial dealings of the ultra-wealthy, serving as a tax haven for powerful figures worldwide. If any country dared to challenge Panama, they wouldn't just be facing the local paramilitary. They'd be up against the interests of countless global elites who are keen to protect their hidden fortunes. Now, that's how you ensure your independence, by becoming the discreet banker to the rich and powerful. But as surprising as Panama's defense strategy might be, the next country on our list takes military weakness to another level. Stay tuned. 3. Suriname. Suriname is yet another country that seems to have little to fear when it comes to potential invasions. The reason? Nature itself has turned this small South American nation into a fortress. With nearly 90% of the country covered in dense, untouched rainforests, Suriname's greatest defense is the wilderness that surrounds it, something the world is keen to preserve. Beyond nature's protection, Suriname can also count on the Netherlands to step in if necessary, as the Dutch still maintain significant interests in their former colony, which only gained independence in 1975. And let's not forget Suriname's neighbor, French Guiana, a part of the European Union, which ensures that France won't tolerate any conflicts near its borders. With all these factors in its favor, it's no wonder Suriname's army seems less imposing than the natural landscape itself. The country's military consists of a single light infantry battalion, a special forces unit, and a military police corps. Together, just around 1,800 personnel tasked with protecting a handful of cities nestled in the jungle. Tanks or artillery? Not needed, since they wouldn't be much use outside the urban areas. Instead, they rely on roughly 600 vehicles, many of which are decades-old transport trucks left behind by the Dutch. As for air power, Suriname's air force is nearly non-existent, with just 3 search and rescue helicopters in operation. And while you might think that being a coastal country along the Atlantic would mean they have a formidable naval presence, their fleet consists of just 16 lightly armed patrol vessels, hardly the naval force one would expect. Suriname's defense budget reflects this modest military setup, with only $41.8 million allocated annually. In truth, the nation relies more on its impenetrable jungles to keep it safe than on its troops. After all, stumbling upon a jaguar in Suriname's rainforest is far more likely and far more terrifying than encountering any military personnel. In fact, the only soldiers you're likely to meet are the ones sent to rescue you. While Suriname has a pretty solid excuse for its minimal military, the next country on our list faces a different set of challenges. Stay tuned. 2. Somalia. With a population of 12 million, over 1,800 miles of coastline, and nearly 400,000 square miles of land, you'd expect Somalia to command one of the most formidable military forces in Eastern Africa. However, the reality couldn't be more different. Somalia's military is not only one of the smallest in the region, but is also famously ineffective. By the late 1980s, the military was teetering on the brink of collapse, and by the early 1990s, it completely fell apart. To no one's surprise, what was left of the military had more in common with rogue gangs wielding heavy weapons than a professional defense force. Rampant corruption plagued every level of command, and rather than protecting borders or civilians, the army became notorious for committing atrocities against its own people. A foreign diplomat once remarked, "The inefficiency of the Somali armed forces is legendary." And indeed, after the military dissolved and the country plunged into chaos, it wasn't until 2006 that Somalia began to piece together a semblance of a military force once again. However, it's far from the terrifying army one might expect. More of a patchwork group of soldiers trying to maintain some kind of order in the country. With an annual defense budget of only $64 million, they face an uphill battle. Despite the dysfunction, Somalia does manage to maintain an active personnel force of around 17,500 soldiers. Of these, 300 are in the Air Force and 300 in the Navy. What these 300 Air Force personnel do is anyone's guess, as Somalia has no planes, no helicopters, and no actual Air Force to speak of. Yet somehow a fifth of the defense budget is allocated to this ghost Air Force. The Navy, on the other hand, does have a job, mainly staying close to the ports to avoid confrontations with local pirates. Their fleet consists of 11 patrol vessels that are primarily used for coastal protection, though they rarely venture far from land. Somalia's land forces, which receive the largest portion of the budget, fare no better. Rather than operating modern vehicles or equipment, they have no tanks, no artillery, and no significant firepower. The military relies on about 1,500 transport vehicles, if they have fuel, that is. Corruption runs deep, and fuel is often stolen and sold on the black market, making military operations even more difficult. Adding to their logistical woes, Somalia lacks proper infrastructure to support any serious military activity. The country has no railways, no internal waterways, and only 15,000 kilometers of roads, rendering supply lines inefficient and unreliable. So how does Somalia remain independent? It's hard to say. Perhaps the harsh conditions and widespread poverty deter others from trying to control the territory. Whoever might attempt it would be burdened with a host of problems: starvation, instability, and internal strife. In recent years, international intervention has helped combat some of Somalia's issues, with US, Russian, British, Italian, and French ships dispersing the pirates that once plagued Somali waters. The US has also offered training to Somali forces and assistance in dealing with insurgents. Yet, the country's entrenched corruption continues to prevent meaningful progress, and Somalia remains stuck in this cycle. Still, despite these struggles, Somali soldiers can take some comfort in knowing they're not at the very bottom of the list. That distinction belongs to 1. Bhutan. It's probably no surprise that a country with a Minister of Happiness doesn't prioritize having a powerful military. Nestled high in the Himalayan mountains between two of the world's most populous nations, India and China, Bhutan's rugged terrain and isolation provide natural protection. Being conquered doesn't seem like a top concern for a country perched on sharp, steep cliffs. After all, starting a major conflict between India and China over Bhutan is hardly on anyone's agenda. Though Bhutan's military might be small, it did spring into action in 2010, when Indian separatists attempted to invade. Bhutan's modest army of just 5,000 soldiers managed to fend off the invaders, but not without significant assistance from both India and China. With an annual defense budget of $29 million, Bhutan's military expenditures seem reasonable for a country of its size and needs. One can only wonder if the Ministry of Happiness has a similar budget for 2023. Being landlocked, Bhutan has no navy, and its mountainous terrain makes an air force impractical. There's no real space to build a functioning airbase, and it wouldn't be much use against India's or China's advanced air forces anyway. As for tanks and artillery, those are equally useless in the steep, rocky landscapes of Bhutan, where an avalanche is more likely than a tank battle. The country operates just 50 vehicles, mostly for transport. So what keeps Bhutan safe? A combination of factors: geography, the status quo between India and China, and Bhutan's minimal strategic value. Its most abundant resource is water, and as long as the country manages this resource responsibly, it's unlikely to face any serious threats from its powerful neighbors. In a way, Bhutan's security seems to stem from the fact that no one really wants its land, which might feel like both a blessing and a slight insult. But with an army of this size, it's probably best not to test that theory. After all, Bhutan's entire military could be overrun in mere hours by any of the world's top special forces. Want to know more about those elite military units? Stay tuned to find out. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world's weakest armies. It's fascinating to see how different countries approach defense and security, from relying on geography to international alliances. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Luxuria Lounge for more intriguing content about global defense and military forces. Let us know in the comments which army surprised you the most, and stay tuned for more in-depth explorations of the world's most powerful and underpowered military forces. See you next time.